My name is Madison Clark, and standing in my cap and gown at 23 years old, I never imagined that the worst moment of my life would happen just minutes before the best one. The words my father screamed across the university courtyard still echo in my mind. "You're nothing but a disappointment, Madison, a complete failure." But he had no idea about the phone call that was coming. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, in a family where success was measured in dollars and degrees from prestigious universities. My father, Robert Clark, was a successful corporate lawyer who had built his reputation defending Fortune 500 companies. At 52, he commanded respect in boardrooms across the Southwest, driving his silver BMW to his downtown office every morning in perfectly pressed suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Our house reflected his status, a sprawling 6,000-square-foot Mediterranean-style home in Paradise Valley, complete with a 3-car garage, infinity pool, and a home office larger than most apartments. The walls were lined with his law school diploma from Harvard, professional awards, and photographs of him shaking hands with politicians and CEOs. Everything in our house served as a reminder of what he considered real achievement. My mother, Patricia, had been a successful marketing executive before she married my father, but she gave up her career to raise my older brother, Marcus, and me. At 49, she spent her days managing charity events and maintaining the social connections that helped advance my father's career. She was intelligent and accomplished in her own right, but had long ago accepted that her role was to support my father's ambitions rather than pursue her own. Marcus, my 26-year-old brother, was everything my father wanted in a son. He graduated summa cum laude from Stanford with a degree in business, then went straight to Wharton for his MBA. Now he worked at Goldman Sachs in New York, pulling in a 7-figure salary and dating a fellow investment banker whose family owned vineyards in Napa Valley. Every phone call from Marcus was another opportunity for my father to brag about his successful son to anyone who would listen. Then there was me, the daughter who chose Arizona State University over the Ivy League schools where I had been accepted, the daughter who majored in aerospace engineering instead of law or business, the daughter who preferred building model rockets in the garage to attending the country club fundraisers that were so important to my family's social standing. My passion for space began when I was 8 years old, and my third-grade teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, showed our class a documentary about the Mars rover missions. While other kids were fascinated by the red planet's surface, I was captivated by the engineering behind the rover itself, how humans had designed and built a machine capable of traveling millions of miles and functioning in an alien environment. That night, I begged my parents for books about rockets and space exploration. My father tolerated what he called my space phase because he assumed I would outgrow it, like most children do with their childhood interests. He bought me expensive telescopes and science kits, thinking they were harmless toys that would eventually be replaced by more practical pursuits. My mother encouraged my curiosity, though she secretly hoped I would develop an interest in something more traditionally feminine as I got older. But I never outgrew my fascination with aerospace engineering. Throughout middle school and high school, while my classmates were focused on social media and dating, I spent my free time learning about propulsion systems, orbital mechanics, and spacecraft design. I devoured every book I could find about NASA missions, read technical papers that were far above my grade level, and taught myself programming languages so I could run simulations of rocket trajectories. My academic performance was exceptional. I graduated as valedictorian of my high school class with a perfect 4.0 GPA and test scores that put me in the 99th percentile nationally. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and Stanford all offered me full scholarships, along with personal letters from admissions directors praising my academic achievements and research potential. My father was ecstatic about these acceptances, already planning how he would casually mention at dinner parties that his daughter was attending Harvard. He had his future mapped out: undergraduate degree from an Ivy League school, followed by law school, then a position at his firm, where I would eventually become a partner. The Clark family legal dynasty would continue with both of his children following in his footsteps.
The day I told him I was declining all the Ivy League offers to attend Arizona State University was the first time I saw genuine anger in his eyes. We were sitting in his home office, surrounded by his achievements, when I explained that ASU had one of the top aerospace engineering programs in the country and offered opportunities for hands-on research that the other schools couldn't match. Aerospace engineering, he said, as if the words tasted bitter in his mouth. Madison, you're throwing away opportunities that most people can only dream of. You could become a Supreme Court justice, a partner at a major law firm, maybe even run for political office someday. Instead, you want to play with toy rockets? I tried to explain that aerospace engineering was a legitimate field with incredible career prospects, that companies like SpaceX and Boeing were revolutionizing space exploration, that NASA was planning missions to Mars within the next decade. But he wouldn't listen. To him, anything that wasn't law, medicine, or high finance was a waste of intellectual talent. My mother attempted to mediate, suggesting that I could always change majors once I experienced college life, but I knew what I wanted. I had already been accepted into ASU's prestigious Barrett Honors College and had secured a research position with Dr. Jennifer Santos, whose team was developing next-generation ion propulsion systems for deep space missions.
The tension in our house became unbearable. My father stopped mentioning my academic achievements to his colleagues, instead focusing exclusively on Marcus's success in investment banking. Family dinners became exercises in passive-aggressive commentary about practical career choices and understanding the real world. My mother tried to maintain peace by avoiding the subject altogether, but the disappointment in my father's eyes was impossible to ignore. Starting college at ASU felt like stepping into a world where my interests were not only accepted, but celebrated. My professors were leading researchers in their fields, my classmates shared my passion for space exploration, and the engineering labs were equipped with technology that would have been science fiction just a few decades earlier. I threw myself into my studies with an intensity that surprised even me. My coursework included advanced mathematics, physics, thermodynamics, material science, and computer programming. I spent countless hours in the lab, working on projects that ranged from designing more efficient rocket nozzles to developing software for satellite navigation systems. Dr. Santos became not just my advisor, but a mentor who understood my ambitions. Under her guidance, I contributed to research papers that were published in peer-reviewed aerospace journals, an almost unheard-of achievement for an undergraduate student. My junior year, I was selected for a competitive internship at Lockheed Martin's Space Systems Division, where I worked on components for the Orion spacecraft that would eventually carry astronauts back to the moon. But none of these achievements seemed to matter to my father. When I called home excited about my research being published, he would change the subject to Marcus's latest promotion. When I tried to explain the significance of my internship at Lockheed Martin, he would point out that Marcus was closing deals worth more money than I would probably make in my entire career. The disconnect between my academic success and my father's approval created a constant undercurrent of frustration in my life. I was excelling in one of the most challenging fields of study, working with some of the brightest minds in aerospace engineering, and contributing to research that could shape the future of space exploration. Yet I felt like a failure in my father's eyes because I wasn't following the path he had chosen for me. My relationship with my family became increasingly strained as I progressed through college. Holiday visits home were exercises in endurance, with my father making pointed comments about impractical career choices while praising Marcus's latest achievements on Wall Street. My mother tried to bridge the gap between us, but she was caught between supporting her daughter's dreams and maintaining harmony with her husband. The irony was that I was becoming exactly the kind of person my father claimed to value. Someone who worked harder than their peers, who achieved excellence in their chosen field, who had the respect of professors and industry professionals. But because my field wasn't one he understood or valued, none of it mattered to him. As my senior year approached, I knew that graduation day would be a test of our relationship. Would my father be able to put aside his disappointment and celebrate my achievement? Or would the tension that had been building for 4 years finally reach a breaking point?
I hoped that seeing me walk across that stage, knowing that I had earned my degree with highest honors, might help him understand that success comes in many forms. But I had no way of knowing that graduation day would bring revelations that would change everything, not just between my father and me, but in ways that would reshape my entire future. Senior year brought new pressures and opportunities that would test every relationship in my life. Dr. Santos had recommended me for an exclusive graduate fellowship at MIT, which would fast-track me into their doctoral program in aeronautics and astronautics. The fellowship came with full funding, a research stipend, and the chance to work directly with NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory on Mars mission planning. When I received the acceptance letter in February, I was torn between excitement and dread. This was everything I had dreamed of, the chance to work at the forefront of space exploration with unlimited resources and brilliant colleagues. But I knew my father would see it as another 4 to 6 years of playing with rockets instead of entering the real world. I decided to wait until graduation to tell my family about MIT. My reasoning was that once they saw me receive my degree with summa cum laude, once they witnessed the recognition I had earned from my professors and peers, they might finally understand that my chosen path had merit. It was naive thinking, but I was desperate for my father's approval. Meanwhile, my senior capstone project was consuming every spare moment I had. Working with a team of 3 other students, we were designing a revolutionary propulsion system for small satellites, CubeSats, that could enable them to perform complex orbital maneuvers previously impossible for spacecraft of their size. Our faculty advisor, Dr. Michael Chen, believed our design could change how universities and small companies accessed space.
A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The project required us to build and test actual hardware, not just computer simulations. We spent weeks in the machine shop, learning to operate lathes and milling machines to create precision components. I often worked until the early hours of the morning, fine-tuning our thruster design and running computational fluid dynamics simulations to optimize performance. My teammates, Alex Rodriguez, Sarah Kim, and David Thompson, became some of my closest friends. Unlike my family, they understood the significance of what we were attempting. When we successfully fired our prototype thruster for the first time and achieved the predicted thrust levels, we celebrated like we had just landed on Mars. That moment of shared triumph highlighted how isolated I felt from my own family's understanding. The contrast became even more stark when Marcus called during one of our late-night lab sessions. He was excited about a merger he was facilitating that would net him a massive bonus, enough to buy a penthouse apartment in Manhattan. As he described his success, I looked around at our cluttered lab space, with its smell of machine oil and burned electronics, and realized we lived in completely different worlds. "What are you doing up so late?" Marcus asked when he heard the noise of our equipment in the background. "Working on my senior project," I said, trying to keep the conversation brief. "Still playing with rockets, huh?" he said with the same dismissive tone our father used. "When are you going to grow up and get a real job?" I hung up feeling more isolated than ever. Even my brother, who had once built model airplanes with me as kids, now saw my passion as childish. The gulf between my achievements and my family's perception of them seemed to widen every day. Spring semester brought another complication when my mother started pressuring me to bring a date to graduation. She had apparently been fielding questions from family friends about my social life, and my single status was becoming an embarrassment for her. "There must be some nice young men in your engineering program," she said during one of our weekly phone calls. "Maybe someone from a good family who's planning to go to law school or medical school after graduation?" I tried to explain that most of my male classmates were as focused on their studies as I was, and that dating wasn't a priority when I was trying to maintain my 4.0 GPA while working on cutting-edge research. But my mother seemed to think that a boyfriend, preferably one with conventional career aspirations, might somehow legitimize my choices in my father's eyes. The truth was, I had been too busy to maintain any serious relationships. There had been a few dates with fellow engineering students, but nothing that developed into anything meaningful.
My social life revolved around study groups, lab work, and the occasional pizza with my project teammates. It wasn't the glamorous college experience my parents had imagined, but it was exactly what I needed to achieve my goals. As March turned to April, my father's comments about my future became increasingly pointed. During a family dinner when I was home for spring break, he announced that he had spoken to several partners at his firm about potential entry-level positions for me after graduation. Johnson, Bradley and Associates has an opening in their patent law division, he said, cutting his steak with precise movements. It would be perfect for someone with your technical background. You could start there while you prepare for the LSAT. Dad, I'm not going to law school, I said as gently as possible. I've already told you about the MIT fellowship. His fork clattered against his plate. MIT for more engineering? Madison, you're 23 years old. It's time to think about building a real career, not extending your childhood indefinitely. Aerospace engineering is a real career, I protested. NASA employs thousands of engineers. So do Boeing, Lockheed Martin, SpaceX. Government work and defense contractors, he interrupted. Do you have any idea how unstable those industries are? One change in political priorities and your entire field could disappear overnight. My mother tried to intervene, suggesting we change the subject, but my father was just getting started. He launched into a detailed explanation of why law was a stable, respected profession that would provide financial security and social status. He pointed out that Marcus's starting salary at Goldman Sachs was higher than what most engineers made after years of experience. Success isn't just about doing what you love, he concluded. It's about making choices that position you for influence and prosperity. You're too smart to waste your talents on a field with such limited opportunities. The conversation ended with me excusing myself early and driving back to campus in tears. The worst part wasn't just his dismissal of my chosen field. It was his certainty that he knew what was best for my life better than I did. Back at school, I threw myself even deeper into my work. Our capstone project was nearing completion, and we were preparing for the final presentation to a panel of industry judges. Dr. Chen had arranged for representatives from several aerospace companies to attend, including someone from NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. The pressure to perform was intense, but it was the kind of pressure I thrived on. Unlike the emotional stress of dealing with my family's disapproval, this was a technical challenge that I could solve through hard work and expertise. My teammates and I rehearsed our presentation dozens of times, anticipating every possible question about our design and testing procedures. 2 weeks before graduation, we presented our project to the judges. Our presentation went flawlessly. We demonstrated our thruster firing, explained our innovative fuel management system, and showed how our design could enable new types of space missions. The NASA representative, Dr. Lisa Park, asked several detailed technical questions that showed she understood the significance of our work. After our presentation, Dr. Park approached me privately. "Your work on the fuel injection system is particularly impressive," she said. "Have you considered applying for positions at NASA after graduation?" I explained about the MIT fellowship, and she nodded approvingly. "That's an excellent program. But if you're ever interested in practical applications of your research, we're always looking for bright engineers. Here's my card." That brief conversation gave me more validation than years of family discussions about my career. Here was a NASA scientist, someone working at the pinnacle of aerospace engineering, recognizing the value of my work. Yet I knew that sharing this moment with my father would only result in another lecture about the instability of government employment. The final weeks before graduation passed in a blur of final exams, project presentations, and preparation for the ceremony. I had earned the highest GPA in my graduating class and had been selected to receive the Outstanding Senior Award from the Aerospace Engineering Department. These honors should have been causes for celebration, but I found myself dreading the conversations they would inevitably trigger with my family. My parents had confirmed they would attend graduation, along with my maternal grandparents who were flying in from Chicago. Marcus had initially planned to come, but canceled at the last minute due to an important client meeting. Even his absence felt like another reminder that my achievements weren't worth prioritizing. As graduation day approached, I found myself caught between hope and resignation. Part of me still believed that seeing me receive recognition for academic excellence might finally help my father understand that I had chosen a legitimate path. But a larger part of me was preparing for disappointment, for another round of lectures about wasted potential and poor life choices. I had no way of knowing that graduation day would bring a revelation that would silence every criticism, validate every choice I had made, and prove that sometimes the biggest risks lead to the most extraordinary rewards. The phone call that would change everything was still days away, but the foundation for that moment had been building throughout my entire college career. 3 weeks before graduation, everything changed when I received an unexpected email that would set the stage for the most important decision of my life. The message came from Dr. Rebecca Martinez, Director of Human Resources at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston. The subject line was simple but electrifying: confidential, Artemis program opportunity. I stared at the email for several minutes before opening it, my heart racing. The Artemis program was NASA's ambitious plan to return humans to the moon by 2026 and establish a permanent lunar base. It was the most exciting space initiative since the Apollo missions, and every aerospace engineer in the country knew about its significance. The email was formal but warm. Dear Miss Clark, your work on advanced propulsion systems has come to our attention through Dr. Lisa Park at Goddard. We have an immediate opening for a mission planning specialist on the Artemis Lunar Lander Development Team. This is a GS-13 position with security clearance requirements and would begin immediately after your graduation. Due to the sensitive nature of this program, we would need your response within 72 hours if you are interested in proceeding with the application process. I read the email 3 times, each time feeling more disbelief. NASA didn't just randomly recruit college seniors for critical mission positions. This was the kind of opportunity that typically went to engineers with years of experience and advanced degrees. The fact that they were reaching out to me specifically meant that my work had made a bigger impression than I had realized. The timing created an impossible dilemma. I had already accepted the MIT fellowship, which was scheduled to begin in September. The fellowship was a guaranteed path to a doctoral degree and would position me perfectly for a research career. But this NASA opportunity was a chance to work on actual missions that would put humans back on the moon, something that might not come around again for years. I immediately called Dr. Santos, hoping she could help me think through the decision. She listened carefully as I read her the email, and I could hear the excitement in her voice even over the phone. Madison, this is extraordinary, she said. The Artemis program is the most important space initiative of our generation. They don't offer positions like this to people straight out of undergraduate programs unless they see exceptional potential. But what about MIT? I asked. This fellowship is everything I've worked toward. MIT will always be there, she replied. But opportunities like this, to be part of history in the making, come along once in a lifetime. You could always pursue graduate school later, and having NASA experience on your resume would make you a stronger candidate anywhere you applied. After hanging up with Dr. Santos, I spent hours researching everything I could find about the Artemis program and the specific role they were offering. The mission planning specialist position involved designing flight trajectories, calculating fuel requirements, and coordinating with multiple engineering teams to ensure mission success. It was exactly the kind of work I had been preparing for through my coursework and research projects. The security clearance requirement added another layer of complexity. The background investigation process was thorough and could take months to complete. NASA would need to interview my professors, employers, neighbors, and even my family. The thought of government investigators asking my father about my character and reliability filled me with anxiety, given his obvious disappointment in my career choices. I decided not to tell my family about the NASA opportunity until after graduation. Part of me wanted to see if I could handle the application process and background investigation without their knowledge. If everything worked out, I could surprise them with the news. If it didn't, I would still have the MIT fellowship as a backup plan.
Submitting my application to NASA felt like jumping off a cliff. The online forms were extensive, requiring detailed information about my academic background, research experience, and personal history. I had to provide references from professors, describe my technical skills in precise detail, and explain why I was interested in the Artemis program specifically. The most challenging part was the personal statement, where I had to articulate my vision for the future of space exploration and explain how my skills would contribute to NASA's mission. I spent 3 days writing and revising, trying to capture my passion for aerospace engineering while demonstrating the technical competence they were looking for. 2 days after submitting my application, I received a call from NASA's security office to begin the clearance process. The investigation would include interviews with people who had known me for at least 5 years, financial background checks, and psychological evaluations. They scheduled my initial interview for the Monday after graduation. Meanwhile, the pressure from my family about my post-graduation plans was intensifying. My father had arranged for me to meet with 3 different law firms during my final weeks of classes, insisting that I should at least explore my options before committing to more school. "Madison, you're being stubborn about this," he said during one particularly tense phone conversation. "I've set up interviews with some of the best firms in Phoenix. The patent law position at Henderson & Associates would be perfect for someone with your technical background." "Dad, I've already told you I'm not interested in law," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have other plans after graduation." "What other plans?" he demanded. "You keep talking about this MIT program like it's some kind of achievement, but all you're doing is delaying real life for another 4 years." I wanted desperately to tell him about the NASA opportunity, to see his reaction when he learned that his daughter was being recruited by the most prestigious space agency in the world. But something held me back. Maybe it was fear that he would find a way to diminish even this achievement, or maybe it was a desire to prove myself without his approval. The law firm interviews were exercises in frustration. The attorneys were pleasant and professional, but it was clear that they saw me as a promising candidate who could bring valuable technical expertise to their intellectual property practices. They talked about billable hours, partnership tracks, and the financial rewards of corporate law practice. One partner, James Henderson, was particularly persistent. "Your aerospace background would be invaluable in patent litigation," he explained. "Technology companies are constantly fighting over intellectual property rights, and someone who understands the technical details can command premium billing rates." I sat through these meetings politely, asking appropriate questions and taking notes, but my mind was constantly wandering to the NASA application. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it might be news from Houston about my security clearance or the next steps in their hiring process. My mother tried to play peacemaker, suggesting that maybe I could work at a law firm for a year or 2 while preparing for the LSAT. "It would give you real-world experience and help you save money for law school," she argued. "And your father would be so proud to see you using your talents in a respected profession." The word respected stung more than she probably intended. The implication was clear. Aerospace engineering was not a respected profession in their minds, regardless of its technical challenges or societal importance. 2 weeks before graduation, I received another call from NASA. This time, it was Dr. Martinez herself, calling to inform me that my initial application had been approved, and they wanted to schedule a formal interview with the Artemis program director. The interview would take place at Johnson Space Center the week after my graduation ceremony. "I have to tell you, Madison," Dr. Martinez said, "we rarely move this quickly with new graduates. Your professors have given you exceptional recommendations, and your research work has impressed our technical review committee. If the interview goes well, we could have an offer letter ready within days." After hanging up, I sat in my empty dorm room. Most of my belongings were already packed for the move home, and tried to process what was happening. In less than a month, I had gone from being a college student with uncertain prospects to being actively recruited by NASA for one of the most important space programs in history. But I still hadn't told my family, and graduation was approaching fast. I knew that the ceremony would force a confrontation about my future plans. My father expected me to announce my acceptance of one of the law firm positions. My mother hoped I would choose something that would make them proud to discuss at social gatherings.
Neither of them had any idea that their daughter was potentially days away from becoming a NASA engineer. The decision to keep the NASA opportunity secret was becoming harder to justify, but I convinced myself that I was protecting everyone from disappointment if things didn't work out. If NASA ultimately decided not to hire me, my family would never need to know about the opportunity I had missed. If they did hire me, the surprise would be worth the temporary deception. Graduation week arrived with a flurry of final preparations and family obligations. My grandparents flew in from Chicago, full of excitement about seeing their granddaughter receive her degree. My parents booked a suite at the Phoenix Biltmore and made dinner reservations at the city's most exclusive restaurant to celebrate my graduation. The irony wasn't lost on me that they were planning an elaborate celebration for an achievement they fundamentally didn't respect. But I decided to focus on the positive. Regardless of their opinions about my career choice, they were proud enough of my academic success to mark it with a significant celebration. 3 days before the ceremony, I had my final meeting with Dr. Santos to discuss the transition to MIT. She was excited about the research opportunities waiting for me in Cambridge, but I could tell she sensed something was troubling me. "Madison, you seem distracted," she observed. "Are you having second thoughts about graduate school?"
I wanted to tell her about the NASA opportunity, but the need for confidentiality during the security clearance process meant I couldn't discuss it with anyone. "I'm just nervous about leaving Arizona," I said, which was partially true. This has been home for 4 years. As graduation day approached, I felt like I was living in 2 different worlds simultaneously. In one world, I was the dutiful daughter preparing to disappoint her parents with another impractical career decision. In the other, I was a potential NASA engineer on the verge of joining the most exciting space program since Apollo. The collision between these 2 worlds was inevitable, and I had no idea how explosive that collision would be. Graduation morning arrived with Arizona's signature blazing sunshine and a temperature that promised to reach 105 degrees by afternoon. I woke up at 5:30 a.m. in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling fan that had been my companion through countless sleepless nights of studying. Today felt different from every other morning of my life, like standing at the edge of a precipice, knowing that by evening, everything would be irreversibly changed. My phone showed 17 missed calls and 43 text messages, but none were from NASA. Most were congratulations from classmates, professors, and friends from high school who had seen my graduation announcement on social media. Dr. Santos had sent a beautiful message about how proud she was of my accomplishments. Alex, Sarah, and David from my capstone team had created a group chat full of rocket ship emojis and promises to stay in touch wherever our careers took us. But there was nothing from Houston. Nothing about my security clearance, nothing about the interview that was supposed to happen next week, nothing that would give me any indication of whether my secret NASA opportunity was still viable. Downstairs, my mother was already bustling around the kitchen, preparing what she called Madison's special graduation breakfast, blueberry pancakes with whipped cream and turkey bacon, the same meal she had made for Marcus when he graduated from Stanford. She was wearing her favorite dress, a navy blue sheath that she reserved for important family occasions, and had obviously spent extra time on her hair and makeup. "There's my college graduate," she exclaimed, enveloping me in a hug that smelled like her signature perfume and hairspray. "I can't believe my baby girl is finally done with school. Well, until you start law school next year." That last comment hit like a punch to the stomach. Somehow, in her mind, my acceptance to MIT had been translated into an inevitable transition to law school. I realized that my parents had been having conversations about my future that didn't include my actual input, creating a narrative that fit their expectations rather than my reality. My father emerged from his home office carrying a cup of coffee and the Wall Street Journal, his standard morning routine even on weekends. He was already dressed in the charcoal gray suit he had chosen for the ceremony, complete with a tie that probably cost more than my textbooks for an entire semester. "Morning, Madison," he said, kissing my forehead with the perfunctory affection of someone checking an item off a to-do list. "Big day today. Are you ready to put this engineering phase behind you and start thinking about your real future?" I felt my jaw clench involuntarily. "Dad, aerospace engineering isn't a phase. It's my career." He waved dismissively while scanning the financial headlines. "We'll see.
Once you experience the intellectual stimulation and financial rewards of legal practice, you'll understand why I've been pushing you in that direction. James Henderson called yesterday, by the way. He's prepared to make you a very generous offer to start in their patent division this fall. I haven't even interviewed with them yet, I protested. The interview is just a formality, my father replied. Your technical background makes you extremely valuable to a firm like theirs. They're talking about a starting salary of $95,000, plus benefits and bonus potential. That's more than most engineers make after 5 years of experience. My mother set a plate of pancakes in front of me, but my appetite had vanished. The casual way my father was discussing my future, as if my own preferences were irrelevant details to be negotiated around, made me feel like a commodity being traded rather than a person making life decisions. What if I don't want to work at Henderson and Associates? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. My father finally looked up from his newspaper, his expression showing the patience of someone explaining something obvious to a child. Madison, you're young and idealistic. That's admirable, but it's also impractical. You need to think about financial security, professional advancement, and social standing. Engineering might seem exciting now, but where does it lead? A career at some government agency making bureaucrat wages? Working for defense contractors who could lay you off the moment a contract gets canceled? Each word felt like another weight added to my chest. Here was my father, a successful professional who should have been celebrating my academic achievements, instead treating my life's passion like a hobby I needed to outgrow. Robert, maybe we should focus on celebrating today, my mother interjected gently. I am celebrating, he replied. I'm celebrating the fact that she's finally in a position to make smart career choices instead of chasing childhood fantasies. I excused myself to get ready, my hands shaking as I climbed the stairs. In my room, I put on the dress I had bought specifically for graduation, a sophisticated burgundy wrap dress that I had thought would make me look professional and accomplished. Now, it felt like a costume for a performance I didn't want to give. My phone rang as I was applying makeup. Unknown number with a Houston area code. My heart stopped. Madison Clark? The voice was crisp and professional. Yes, this is Madison.
This is Director Patricia Hughes from Johnson Space Center. I apologize for the short notice, but we need to discuss your application status immediately. Are you available for a brief conversation? I closed my bedroom door and lowered my voice. Yes, absolutely. Is everything okay? More than okay, she replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Your security clearance has been expedited due to urgent mission requirements. We're prepared to offer you the Mission Planning Specialist position immediately, pending a final interview this Tuesday. The salary is $78,000 annually, with full federal benefits and opportunities for rapid advancement based on performance. I sank onto my bed, overwhelmed. That's incredible. I accept. I mean, pending the interview, but yes, I'm very interested. Excellent. We'll email you the formal offer letter and interview details within the hour. Madison, I want you to know that this is highly unusual. We typically require years of experience for positions of this responsibility, but your academic record and research work have impressed everyone here. Dr. Park specifically requested that we fast-track your application. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. NASA wanted me, not just for any position, but for a critical role in the Artemis program that would put humans back on the moon. This was validation beyond anything I had ever imagined possible. But I was still sitting in my childhood bedroom, about to attend a graduation ceremony where my family expected me to announce my acceptance of a law firm position that I had never wanted. The disconnect between my reality and their expectations had never felt more stark. I heard my father's voice calling from downstairs. Madison, your grandparents just arrived. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of family photos, forced smiles, and increasingly pointed comments about my future plans. My grandmother, a retired teacher from Chicago, was genuinely excited about my engineering degree and asked thoughtful questions about my studies. My grandfather, a World War II veteran who had worked as a machinist, seemed impressed when I described some of the technical challenges I had overcome in my research.
But their enthusiasm only seemed to irritate my father more. During the drive to campus, with my grandparents following in their rental car, he became increasingly vocal about his expectations for the day. "I hope you're planning to announce your decision about Henderson and Associates during your speech," he said, adjusting his rearview mirror. "It would be a nice way to show everyone that you're thinking practically about your future." "What speech?" I asked, confused. "You're graduating summa cum laude and receiving the Outstanding Senior Award," my mother explained. "Didn't you know you'd be giving remarks during the ceremony?" My stomach dropped. I had been so focused on the NASA opportunity and managing family expectations that I had completely forgotten about the speaking requirement for award recipients. I would be standing in front of hundreds of people, including my family, expected to talk about my plans for the future. The campus was bustling with graduates and families when we arrived. Everywhere I looked, I saw scenes of celebration. Parents hugging their children, families posing for photos, friends exchanging contact information and promises to stay in touch. The atmosphere should have been joyful, but I felt like I was moving through it all in a fog of anxiety. In the staging area behind the auditorium, I found my cap and gown and joined the other award recipients for a brief rehearsal of the ceremony. The student coordinator, a cheerful senior from the communications department, explained that each award winner would have 2 minutes to address the audience after receiving their recognition. "Just talk about your experience here and your plans for the future," she said brightly. "Everyone loves to hear about students' next steps." I had no idea what I was going to say. Tell the truth about NASA and shock my family in front of hundreds of strangers? Lie about law school and betray everything I believed in? Somehow find a middle ground that satisfies no one? Madison Clark will now share some remarks with us about her experience here and her plans for the future. I approached the podium, looking out at an audience of faces that included professors who had believed in me, classmates who had shared my passion for aerospace engineering, and family members who expected me to announce my transition to a legal career. And then, standing at that podium with my heart pounding and my mouth dry, I made a decision that would change everything. I opened my mouth to speak, having no idea what words would come out, knowing only that whatever I said in the next 2 minutes would determine the course of the rest of my life. Standing at that podium, looking out at hundreds of expectant faces, I felt time slow to a crawl. The microphone amplified my nervous breathing, and somewhere in the back of my mind, I registered the sound of cameras clicking as photographers captured what they assumed would be a routine graduation speech. My eyes found my family in the crowd. My father was leaning forward slightly, his expression expectant, probably anticipating my announcement about joining Henderson and Associates. My mother had her hands clasped together, her smile bright but tense. My grandparents looked absolutely radiant with pride, and their unconditional joy gave me a moment of clarity. 4 years ago, I began, my voice stronger than I expected. My father told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life by choosing aerospace engineering over a pre-law track at an Ivy League school. As we lined up for the processional, I spotted my family in the audience. My father was checking his phone, probably reading work emails even during my graduation ceremony. My mother was scanning the crowd, undoubtedly looking for people she knew so she could discuss her daughter's bright future in law. My grandparents were beaming with pride, their faces glowing with the kind of unconditional support I had been craving from my parents. The ceremony began with the usual pageantry, academic processions, ceremonial music, speeches from university officials about the bright futures awaiting the graduating class. I sat with the other award recipients in the front row, my mind racing through possible versions of the speech I would have to give in less than an hour. When they called my name for the Outstanding Senior Award, I walked across the stage in a daze. The dean shook my hand and handed me a plaque while photographers captured the moment. Then came the moment I had been dreading. A murmur rippled through the audience.
This wasn't the typical graduation speech they were expecting. I could see my father's expression shift from expectation to alarm. He told me I was throwing away my future for childhood fantasies, that I was too smart to waste my talents on something as impractical as rockets and space exploration. The auditorium had gone completely silent. Even the photographers had stopped clicking. For 4 years, I've listened to lectures about real careers and financial security. I've been told that my 4.0 GPA in aerospace engineering is less valuable than a mediocre performance in law school. I've watched my family celebrate my brother's success in investment banking while treating my research publications and engineering awards like participation trophies. I paused, my heart hammering against my ribs. There was no going back now. This morning, my father informed me that he's arranged a job for me at a patent law firm, making decisions about my life without consulting me. He expects me to abandon everything I've worked for and start over in a field I have no interest in, simply because he doesn't understand or value what I've accomplished. In the audience, I could see my father's face flushing red. My mother looked mortified, probably calculating how many family friends were witnessing this public confrontation. But what my family doesn't know, what I haven't told them because I was afraid they'd find a way to diminish even this achievement, is that 3 hours ago, NASA offered me a position as a mission planning specialist on the Artemis program. The effect was instantaneous. The entire auditorium erupted in surprised murmurs and spontaneous applause. Dr. Santos was on her feet, beaming with pride. My capstone teammates were cheering from their seats among the graduates. Even some of the faculty members who barely knew me were applauding enthusiastically. But my family sat in stunned silence, their faces frozen in various stages of shock and disbelief. The Artemis program, I continued, my voice gaining confidence with each word, is NASA's mission to return humans to the moon and establish a permanent lunar base. It's the most ambitious space exploration program since Apollo, and they want me, a kid who supposedly wasted her time playing with toy rockets, to help plan the missions that will put the first woman and the next man on the lunar surface. The applause grew louder. I could see people turning to their neighbors, explaining the significance of what I had just announced. In the academic world, a NASA position straight out of undergraduate school was almost unheard of. So, to my family and to everyone else who ever told me to be more practical, more realistic, more conventional, this is what happens when you follow your passion instead of other people's expectations. This is what happens when you refuse to let anyone else define your worth or your potential. I paused, looking directly at my father, whose expression had shifted from shock to something that might have been embarrassment. I won't be joining any law firm. I won't be taking the LSAT. I won't be pursuing the safe, conventional path that everyone thinks I should want. Instead, I'll be moving to Houston to help NASA return humanity to the moon, and I've never been more certain of anything in my life. The standing ovation that followed was thunderous. Students, faculty, families, everyone seemed to understand the magnitude of what had just happened. This wasn't just a graduation speech. It was a declaration of independence, a public rejection of the limitations others had tried to place on my dreams. As I walked back to my seat, my legs shaking from adrenaline, I caught sight of my family again. My father looked like he had been punched in the stomach. My mother was staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. But my grandparents, my wonderful supportive grandparents, were clapping enthusiastically, their faces glowing with pride and perhaps a touch of vindication. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur. When my name was called for my diploma, the applause was noticeably louder than for other graduates. Word of my NASA announcement had spread quickly through the audience. As I shook the dean's hand, he whispered, "Congratulations on NASA, Madison. You've made us all proud." After the ceremony ended and graduates began mingling with their families, I stood frozen near the stage, suddenly terrified to face the conversation that was inevitably coming.
Dr. Santos reached me first, pulling me into a fierce hug. Madison, that was the most extraordinary thing I've ever witnessed at a graduation ceremony. NASA, I can't believe you kept that secret. I was scared they wouldn't understand, I admitted. I was scared they'd find a way to make me doubt myself. Well, there's no doubt about anything now, she laughed. You just announced your NASA position to 500 people. I think your secret is out. My capstone teammates surrounded me next, all talking at once in their excitement. Alex was already Googling information about the Artemis program on his phone. Sarah was asking about the application process. She wanted to know if NASA was hiring more recent graduates. David was shaking his head in amazement. You dark horse, he said. All this time we thought you were going to MIT, and you've been secretly applying to NASA?
It just happened, I explained. Dr. Park from NASA was at our capstone presentation, and she recommended me for the position. Everything moved so fast I didn't have time to tell anyone. This is incredible, Sarah said. You're going to be working on actual moon missions, actual lunar landers. Do you realize how amazing this is? I did realize it, but I also realized that the hardest conversation of my life was approaching. Through the crowd of well-wishers and excited classmates, I could see my family slowly making their way toward me. My father's expression was unreadable, but the tension in his posture was obvious even from a distance. When they finally reached me, an awkward silence settled over our little group. My grandmother broke it first, stepping forward to hug me tightly. "Madison, honey, I am so proud of you, I could burst," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "NASA, can you imagine? My granddaughter is going to help put people on the moon." My grandfather was equally enthusiastic, pumping my hand in congratulations and asking detailed questions about what my job would involve. Their genuine excitement provided a brief buffer against the storm that was building in my father's expression. Finally, he spoke, his voice carefully controlled, but carrying an undertone of anger that I had never heard before. "Madison, we need to talk, privately." "Robert," my mother began, but he cut her off with a sharp look. "Now," he said firmly. We walked away from the crowd to a quiet corner of the campus courtyard, my mother trailing behind us uncertainly. When we were far enough away from other people, my father turned to face me, his professional composure finally cracking. "What the hell was that?" he demanded, his voice low but furious. "You humiliated me in front of hundreds of people. You made me look like a fool who doesn't know what his own daughter is doing with her life." "I didn't humiliate you," I replied, finding my voice stronger than I expected. "I told the truth about my own achievements." "Your achievements?" he laughed bitterly. "Madison, you just turned down a prestigious law firm position to take a government job that probably pays half as much. You threw away your MIT fellowship for, what? The chance to work with a bunch of bureaucrats on projects that will probably get canceled the moment there's a budget crisis?" Each word hit like a physical blow, but instead of the usual crushing weight of his disapproval, I felt something different rising in my chest. Anger. Pure, righteous anger at years of having my dreams dismissed and my accomplishments minimized. "You still don't get it," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "NASA doesn't just hire anyone, Dad. They recruited me specifically because of my research and academic performance. This is one of the most competitive positions in aerospace engineering, and they offered it to me while I'm still an undergraduate." "It's a government job, Madison," he replied dismissively. "It's not a career, it's a detour. In 5 years, when you're tired of the bureaucracy and ready to make real money, don't expect me to help you get into law school." That was the moment something inside me finally snapped. Years of swallowing my hurt, of trying to earn approval that would never come, of watching my achievements be treated as disappointments. It all came rushing to the surface. "You know what, Dad?" I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "I don't want your help getting into law school. I don't want your help with anything, because your help always comes with the expectation that I'll become someone I'm not." The words hung in the air between us, more definitive than anything I had ever said to him before. This wasn't a disagreement about career choices anymore. This was about fundamental respect for who I was as a person.
And as I stood there, finally speaking my truth after years of silence, I realized that I had already won the only battle that mattered, the battle for my own self-determination. The silence that followed my declaration stretched between us like a chasm. My father stared at me as if I had transformed into someone he didn't recognize. My mother stood frozen, her hands clutched around her purse, probably calculating how much damage control would be needed with their social circle after my very public announcement. "Madison," my father said finally, his voice dangerously quiet, "you're making decisions based on emotion, not logic. You're 23 years old. You don't understand the real world yet." That condescending tone, the same one he had used to dismiss my dreams for 4 years, ignited something fierce inside me. "Don't understand the real world?" I repeated incredulously. "Dad, I just spent 4 years studying advanced mathematics, quantum physics, and thermodynamics while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. I published research in peer-reviewed journals as an undergraduate. I designed and built hardware that successfully operates in space-like conditions. But you think I don't understand the real world because I won't join your law firm?" "That's not what I meant," he began.
No, that's exactly what you meant, I interrupted, years of suppressed frustration finally erupting. You've spent my entire college career treating my achievements like they're worthless because they don't fit your narrow definition of success. When I made Dean's List every semester, you asked why I wasn't studying something more practical. When my research got published, you questioned whether anyone actually reads engineering journals. When I won the Outstanding Senior Award, you saw it as an opportunity to pressure me about law school. My mother finally found her voice. "Madison, honey, we've always been proud of your academic performance, but your father is just worried about your financial future." "No, Mom," I said, turning to face her. "This isn't about money or practical concerns. This is about respect. Do you have any idea what it's like to have your own family treat your life's passion like it's a hobby you need to outgrow?" The emotion in my voice seemed to catch her off guard. For the first time, she looked genuinely uncertain about the position they had been taking. "When Marcus graduated from Stanford," I continued, "you threw him a party with 50 people. You framed his diploma and hung it in the living room. You called all your friends to brag about your son, the investment banker. But when I graduate summa cum laude from one of the top aerospace programs in the country, all I get are lectures about how I'm wasting my intelligence." "That's not fair," my father protested. "Marcus chose a field with clear advancement opportunities and financial stability." "And I chose a field where I just got recruited by NASA," I shouted, my composure finally cracking completely. "NASA, Dad, the same organization that put humans on the moon, that built the International Space Station, that's planning missions to Mars. They looked at my work and decided I was good enough to help plan the missions that will return humans to the moon for the first time in 50 years. How is that not an achievement worth celebrating?" My father's jaw was clenched so tightly I could see the muscles working. "It's a government job, Madison. Government jobs are dead ends. There's no real advancement, no significant financial rewards, no prestige." "No prestige?" I laughed bitterly. "Dad, NASA engineers are some of the most respected professionals in the world. When people ask what I do for a living and I say I work for NASA, they're going to be impressed. When I tell them I help plan moon missions, they're going to think that's the coolest job they've ever heard of. But you can't see past your own prejudices about what constitutes a real career." "You're being naive," he insists. "Space exploration is completely dependent on political whims and budget allocations. One change in administration and your entire program could be canceled. And law firms never lose clients, investment banks never have layoffs, corporate lawyers never get replaced by younger, cheaper associates," I shot back. "At least my work has meaning beyond generating billable hours for rich clients." That hit home. I could see it in the way his expression darkened. "Meaning?" he repeated, his voice cold. "Madison, I've spent 25 years building a successful practice, providing for this family, ensuring that you and Marcus had every educational opportunity available. Don't lecture me about meaningful work." "I'm not attacking your career, Dad. I'm asking you to respect mine."
Respect is earned, he replied sharply, and you haven't earned it by taking the first job offer that comes along just because it sounds exciting. The cruelty of that statement took my breath away. After everything I had accomplished, after years of academic excellence and research achievements, he still saw my NASA position as settling for less than I was capable of. You know what? I said, my voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill over. You're right, respect is earned, and I've spent 4 years earning it from professors, researchers, and now NASA itself. The only people whose respect I haven't earned are the ones who refuse to give it because my accomplishments don't match their expectations. My mother stepped forward, her face pale. Madison, please, you're both saying things you'll regret. This is supposed to be a celebration. Is it? I asked, looking at her directly. Mom, when was the last time either of you asked me about my research? When did you last show genuine interest in what I'm studying or what I hope to accomplish? You've been planning my transition to law school for 4 years without ever asking if that's what I wanted. She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it, apparently unable to find an answer. I called you last semester when my team's propulsion design got selected for testing at NASA's Glenn Research Center, I continued. Do you remember what Dad said? He asked if that meant I would finally start thinking about practical career applications. When I tried to explain why it was significant, he changed the subject to Marcus's promotion. The memory of that phone call still stung. I had been so excited to share my achievement, and my father had treated it like an inconvenience, interrupting more important conversation. Madison, that's not how I remember, my father began. That's exactly how it happened, I said firmly. Just like when I won the Departmental Research Award sophomore year, and you asked if it came with any money. Or when I got accepted to present at the International Astronautical Congress, and you wondered why I was wasting time on conferences when I could be studying for the LSAT. Each example I cited seemed to deflate him slightly. Perhaps he was finally beginning to understand the cumulative effect of years of dismissive comments. I never meant to diminish your achievements, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Intent doesn't erase impact. You've spent 4 years telling me that my passion isn't valuable, that my skills aren't marketable, that my dreams aren't practical. And now, when I've proven you wrong in the most spectacular way possible, you're still trying to convince me I've made a mistake. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it quickly and felt my heart rate spike. Who is that? My mother asked, probably hoping for a distraction from the intensity of our conversation. I looked at the message again, hardly believing what I was reading. It's Dr. Martinez from NASA, I said slowly. She wants to schedule a conference call with the Artemis program director for tomorrow morning. They're expediting my start date. They want me to begin work next Monday. The silence that followed was deafening. My parents stared at me as if I had just announced I was moving to Mars. Next Monday? My mother whispered. But we haven't even had time to process. I mean, we haven't discussed. There's nothing to discuss, I said, surprising myself with how certain I sounded. This is my decision to make, my life to live, my career to build. My father looked like he was struggling to find words. When he finally spoke, his voice was defeated rather than angry. Madison, I don't understand. I've tried to give you every advantage, every opportunity. I've worked my entire career to ensure that you could have choices I never had, and you're throwing it all away for something so uncertain. For the first time in our conversation, I heard something other than disapproval in his voice. I heard fear. Fear that he had failed as a father. Fear that his daughter was making choices he couldn't understand or control. Fear that the future he had envisioned for our family was crumbling. But understanding his fear didn't mean I had to let it dictate my life. Dad, I said gently, you did give me every advantage. You gave me an excellent education, high expectations, and the confidence to pursue challenging goals. But what you're seeing as throwing away opportunities, I see as using those advantages to achieve something extraordinary. How can I be proud of something I don't understand? He asked, and for the first time, he sounded vulnerable rather than authoritative.
By trusting that you raised a daughter smart enough to make good decisions about her own life, I replied. By believing that all those years of telling me I could accomplish anything weren't just empty words. The conversation that followed was unlike any we had ever had. For the first time in years, my father listened, really listened, as I explained my passion for aerospace engineering, the significance of the Artemis program, and my vision for contributing to humanity's expansion into space. My mother asked thoughtful questions about my work environment, living situation in Houston, and career advancement opportunities at NASA. It wasn't a complete transformation. I could see that my father was still struggling to reconcile his expectations with my reality. But for the first time, he seemed to be making an effort to understand rather than simply opposing my choices. By the time we walked back to join my grandparents for our planned celebration dinner, something fundamental had shifted between us. I had finally stopped seeking their approval and started demanding their respect. And while the respect might take time to develop fully, I had reclaimed something even more important: my own sense of worth and self-determination. The battle wasn't completely won, but the most important victory, the victory over my own need for validation, was finally mine. 6 months later, I was sitting in a conference room at Johnson Space Center, surrounded by some of the brightest minds in aerospace engineering, when my phone buzzed with a text from my father. Watching the Artemis mission briefing on NASA's livestream. Saw you presenting the lunar trajectory analysis. Couldn't be prouder. Call me when you can. I stared at the message for a long moment, hardly believing what I was reading. This was the same man who had called my career choice a mistake just half a year ago. The same father who had tried to convince me to abandon my dreams for a law firm position I never wanted. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. The first few weeks after graduation had been a delicate dance of establishing new boundaries while trying to rebuild our relationship on more honest foundations. My parents had driven me to the airport for my flight to Houston, the car ride filled with awkward silences and careful conversations about practical matters: finding an apartment, opening a bank account, navigating health insurance as a federal employee. My father had surprised me by slipping me an envelope as I prepared to go through security. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a note. For your new apartment. I may not understand your choices, but I want you to succeed. Love, Dad. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was an acknowledgement, a recognition that I was an adult making my own decisions, whether he agreed with them or not. My first day at NASA had been everything I had dreamed of and more. The Johnson Space Center was a sprawling complex of cutting-edge laboratories, mission control centers, and engineering facilities where history was being made daily. Walking through the halls lined with photos from the Apollo missions, past offices where engineers were designing the next generation of spacecraft, I felt like I had finally found where I belonged. Dr. Martinez introduced me to my team, 12 experienced engineers and scientists working on mission planning for the Artemis 3 lunar landing. At 23, I was by far the youngest member of the group, but my fresh perspective and recent academic training in advanced propulsion systems proved immediately valuable. My first major assignment was analyzing fuel consumption scenarios for various lunar landing trajectories. It was exactly the kind of complex problem-solving that had drawn me to aerospace engineering in the first place: balancing multiple variables, optimizing for safety and efficiency, and ensuring that every calculation could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Within 3 weeks, I had identified a trajectory modification that could save nearly 200 kilograms of fuel during the lunar descent phase. The savings might seem small, but in space exploration, every kilogram matters. That fuel savings could translate to additional scientific equipment, extended mission duration, or enhanced safety margins. When I presented my findings to the broader Artemis team, including senior engineers with decades of experience, the reception was enthusiastic. Dr. Sarah Chen, the mission planning director, publicly praised my analysis and recommended incorporating my modifications into the official mission profile. That night, I called my mother to share the news. Her reaction was night and day different from the dismissive responses I had grown accustomed to during college. "Madison, that's incredible," she said.
You've been there less than a month and you're already contributing to the actual mission planning? How did you even know to look at that particular problem? For the first time in years, I felt like my mother was truly interested in understanding my work, rather than just being politely supportive. I spent 45 minutes explaining orbital mechanics, fuel efficiency calculations, and the complex engineering challenges in landing humans on the moon.
I have to admit, she said when I finished, I never really understood what aerospace engineering involved until now. What you're describing sounds incredibly sophisticated and important. That conversation marked the beginning of a new dynamic between us. My mother started asking detailed questions about my projects, researching space exploration topics so she could understand my explanations, and even watching NASA press conferences to learn more about the Artemis program. My father's evolution was slower and more complicated. He had spent his entire career in a field where success was measured by billable hours, client satisfaction, and financial outcomes. The world of scientific research and space exploration operated by completely different metrics, and it took him time to understand how achievement was defined in my profession. The breakthrough came 3 months into my NASA career when the agency announced that my trajectory optimization work had been selected for implementation in the actual Artemis 3 mission. The announcement made national news, with several aerospace publications featuring articles about the young engineer whose calculations would help return humans to the moon. My phone rang within hours of the news breaking. It was my father, calling from his office in the middle of a busy workday. "Madison," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I just finished reading the article in Aviation Week about your work. I had no idea. I didn't understand what you were actually doing there." "It's just trajectory analysis, Dad," I said, though I was thrilled by his obvious pride. "No, it's not just anything," he replied firmly. "According to this article, your work will directly impact the safety and success of a mission that's going to make history." They quoted the mission director saying that your modifications represent exactly the kind of innovative thinking NASA needs for the next generation of space exploration. That conversation lasted over an hour, the longest substantive discussion my father and I had ever had about my career. He asked technical questions, wanted me to explain the significance of various aspects of my work, and for the first time seemed genuinely interested in understanding my field rather than dismissing it. The real validation came a month later when NASA invited families to attend a mission planning presentation at Johnson Space Center. It was an unusual opportunity for relatives to see behind the scenes of space mission development, and I had immediately extended invitations to my parents and grandparents. My father took 2 days off work, something he rarely did for anything other than emergencies, and flew to Houston with my mother. Watching them tour the facility, seeing their faces as they observed mission control and met the engineers I worked with daily, I could see their understanding of my career shifting in real time. During my presentation to the family group about lunar trajectory planning, my father sat in the front row taking notes like a law student in a lecture hall. When I finished, he was the first to raise his hand with a question. "Madison," he said, "can you explain how the margin of error in your calculations translates to actual safety measures for the astronauts?" It was a sophisticated question that showed he had been listening carefully and thinking deeply about the implications of my work. As I explained the relationship between mathematical precision and mission safety, I saw something in his expression I had never seen before: professional respect. After the presentation, Dr. Martinez approached my parents personally. "Mr. and Mrs. Clark," she said, "I want you to know that your daughter is one of the most promising young engineers we've ever recruited. Her analytical skills and innovative thinking are already making significant contributions to the Artemis program. We expect her to have a tremendous career here." Watching my father shake hands with NASA's Director of Human Resources, seeing him beam with pride as she praised my work, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't even realized I was seeking. That evening, at dinner in Houston, my father finally said the words I had been waiting to hear my entire life. "Madison, I owe you an apology. I was wrong about your career choice, wrong about the value of your field, and wrong to push you towards something you didn't want.
Watching you present today, seeing how respected you are by your colleagues, understanding even a fraction of the complexity of what you do, I'm incredibly proud of you. Not just proud of your success, but proud of your courage to pursue your passion despite my opposition. The apology meant everything, but what meant even more was what followed. I realize now that I was trying to impose my definition of success on your life instead of trusting you to define it for yourself. You've achieved something extraordinary, and you did it by following your own instincts rather than my advice. I couldn't be more wrong, and I couldn't be more proud. Today, 18 months after that confrontational graduation day, my relationship with my family has been completely transformed. My parents visit Houston regularly, not just to see me, but because they've become genuinely fascinated by space exploration. My mother volunteers with a local astronomy club back in Phoenix, sharing what she's learned about NASA's missions. My father has framed newspaper articles about the Artemis program with my contributions highlighted and displays them in his office alongside his law school diploma and professional awards. Last month, when I was promoted to lead mission planner for the Artemis 4 mission, my father called every family member and close friend to share the news. The man who once dismissed my career as playing with toy rockets now brags to anyone who will listen about his daughter, the rocket scientist. But perhaps the most meaningful change is in how they support my ongoing ambitions. When I told them I was applying for NASA's astronaut candidate program with the eventual goal of being part of the first crewed mission to Mars, there were no lectures about being practical or realistic. Instead, my father researched the selection criteria, and my mother started a scrapbook of my NASA achievements to document my qualifications. The little girl who built model rockets in the garage, who dreamed of space exploration while her family dreamed of law school, who stood alone at graduation before finding her voice, that girl is now helping plan humanity's return to the moon and preparation for the journey to Mars. And her family couldn't be prouder. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't proving others wrong. It's helping them understand that being different doesn't mean being disappointing. It means being exactly who you were meant to be. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.